The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news. Once again, from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, here is your host, Kathy Wyatt.
Well now, children, tonight old Uncle Tom is going to tell you the real true story about Uncle Tom's Cabin. Now, this is the...
Contained in these cultural images is the history of our national conscience. A conscience striving to reconcile the paradox of racism in a nation founded on human equality. A conscience coping with this profound contradiction through caricature. What were the consequences of these caricatures? How did they mold and mirror the reality of racial tensions in America for more than 100 years?
It's being called an evolution of racial consciousness in America. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the media's depiction of blacks, specifically through the eyes of director Marlon Riggs in a documentary called Ethnic Notions. Here to talk more about it today are Dr. Omowale Akintunde, who is the chair for UNO's Black Studies Department. Next to him, Meshach Taylor, who is the actor from the television show Designing Women. And finally, Ben Gray, now a youth outreach specialist. Ben has more than 30 years of experience in the television news industry as a photojournalist, reporter, producer, and host of a show called Kaleidoscope. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Glad to be welcome.
Here. Thank you.
Omowale, let's start with you.
Sure.
If we could just begin by assuring our audience today that this is not designed to be an interview to spark controversy, that we're just going to have some discussion, what would you say to folks?
I would say that's an absolutely correct assessment. The only thing that we want to raise is awareness and enlightenment and offer audiences an opportunity to sit down and discuss how these issues manifest in everyday society and how they inform our deepest level of subconscious knowing.
Okay. A conversation that we are going to found in this documentary called Ethnic Notions.
That is correct.
For people who have not seen this, walk us through it a bit, paint a picture of the documentary.
Certainly. It's a historical retrospective of how African Americans have been traditionally depicted in mass media. And it examines each of these stereotypes and attempts to construct some kind of meaning or explanation for these images and when, where, and how they impact social consciousness.
Okay, wonderful. And Meshach, you're in town for a special showing of this documentary,
Right.
and you're actually going to be facilitating the discussion and so forth.
Yes, well, hopefully that's what I will do. You know, I'm very excited about it because people are very interested in doing this. The reception that I've gotten has been overwhelming. So we are looking forward to a very rousing bit of discussion this evening. Okay. But like you said, not because it's controversial, but because it's historical and it is historically correct. And the implications of these things still are playing out in today's world and in today's entertainment world especially.
Okay, and in your opinion, after having seen the documentary, I guess what would you point out as the key elements? What, in other words, what might you be bringing up tonight?
Well, I'm going to let Omowale take that question because...
Yeah, because you know, when she asked it, I thought about the conversation we had last evening.
Yes.
We were talking about how these images are manifested right now as we look at the current campaign, for example. So I can attest that in addition to providing a historical perspective, it really helps to explain our current social dynamic.
Right.
Definitely.
Which would be?
Which would be that these images are still being produced.
They're alive. They're alive and well.
Yeah, there's going to be this stunning expose at the beginning of the evening that is going to show some characterizations of Barack Obama. and they are erected in the same vein as those historical images. And Meshack fits in perfectly because, you know, having starred in Hollywood as an African-American actor himself on an extraordinarily popular television situation comedy, he will be able to provide the audience with not just an academic perspective, but an experientially based one.
Okay, and if you could please for us go ahead and somewhat summarize how that's all going to shake out this evening for obviously the people who won't be there.
How this will shape up this evening?
Yes.
We'll see. Okay, here's the deal with these open discussions. We don't know, and that's what's so exciting about it, because everyone that will come will bring something very special and personal with them to it, as far as a question is concerned, a comment is concerned, and we will have an opportunity to look at these things and to deconstruct them, and to speak in terms of, like I said, it's historical, but it's also playing itself out. These images specifically of Barack Obama, that are reminiscent of Uncle Tom, they're reminiscent of Aunt Jemima, reminiscent of all these characters from our past that we already know or were offensive. But we're still seeing that in people's characterizations of him now. The T-shirts, the things that are on the internet, that sort of thing. We'll be discussing that as well.
Okay, and what is going to be then your response? In other words, what are you saying to folks to counter what it is that you've just described? What is going to be your message?
Well, my message is that it's incorrect now, and it was incorrect in the past. But my response is not as important as the audience's response, what they feel about it. You already know, obviously, that I don't think that that's correct. That is not the correct way to go. That is something that is insulting and demeaning. But it's something that still is happening in today's world. So I'm very interested to be on a college campus and to hear students, young students, who don't have this historical thing that I have. I'm 61 years old. I've been around a long time. I've seen this the first time it happened. I've also seen it, you know, through the years as a performer in Hollywood and whatever. So my thing tonight, and the reason that I am here, is because I'm here to discuss these images, these concepts with young people who were not raised in that environment.
And I think that as a result, if I may interject,
sure.
They don't understand the profundity of these images. They think that this is something that happened in the past. And Kathy, I might also like to say that although we used a specific political example, the purpose of this is not to push a political agenda or to encourage the audience in that way. At this moment, he is perhaps the most famous African American in the country, and therefore provides a single example. And I would also like to emphasize that this cuts across racial to class and gender boundaries too. The way that women are depicted in media, the way that people who have not amassed a great deal of wealth are depicted. And you know, one of the things that I found disturbing too at one of the town hall meetings was they were using these people in the audience and talking about letting them speak, and then talking about the fact that they didn't articulate their positions well. There's this association with Joe the plumber and things like that. So these class and gender and racial dynamics come together in a very dynamic way.
Okay, and I before we move on to Ben, because I want to ask him a few questions as well. Meshack, what is your hope? You're talking about speaking to the younger generation. What is your hope that they walk away with after an abbreviated, which is really what this is, it's a very brief snapshot in time. What is it that you're going to do? And secondly, what is your hope that they leave all of this with tonight?
What I really would like for them to do is to recognize these things, to recognize when these things are happening, to use critical thinking in the way when they deconstruct these things, to understand what the intent of these things are. You know, so to be able to do that, if we can have this conversation and 4 or 5 youngsters walk out with a concept, understanding how damaging these images are, that kind of, then my work here will have been done.
Okay, wonderful. And Ben, you've been sitting very patiently. What are some of the thoughts going through your mind after hearing these gentlemen?
Well, I guess there are a couple of things that go through my mind, and I guess, when we talk about what we hope happens with this group that comes to watch this video today is that, they will understand and be better prepared to deal with what I know for a fact they're going to run into when they get out on the streets. I mean, we like to think that racism has gone away. We like to think that there are no issues that need to be addressed as it relates to race. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, I don't know that, when a candidate represents himself as confident, I don't know if, I can't remember a time when any politician who's represented himself as confident has been uppity, or those kinds of words that they use. I mean, so and that's a word that's pretty much reserved for black people when they try to go above and beyond what some people describe as their place. I mean, so those things, and those are code words. And what we hope, and what I hope happens tonight personally, is that we do examine some of the code words that reflect, when you want to say something about a particular culture, or you want to say something about a particular gender, or whatever the case may be. I don't know that we would have ever, especially with, when we make the comparisons between him and, for example, Sarah Palin, I don't know if we would have, as a matter of fact, I know the response would not have been the same if the 17-year-old person who was pregnant was Barack Obama's daughter. I don't know if the response, as a matter of fact, I'm sure the response would not have been the same. I'm sure there would have been all of this discussion about, here's another example of why, there needs to be these sorts of things and that sort of thing, these sorts of programs in place, and see how they are, and all of those sorts of things. So, I hope we get to examine and take a look at, some of the code words that are out there, uppity, all of those kinds of things that reflect on a candidate who's just being confident and has the oratory skills to talk about what it is he wants to do and where he wants to lead this country.
All right, and it's a question that I'm going to ask of all three of you because it's been raised. There are people that are watching this show who have a mindset, right or wrong, of what it is that you're describing here. We are not very far away from the election, obviously. How do you, sitting in the places that you are now, how do you try to convince someone, whether we're talking about this or, you were talking about other populations that are also in this type of light, I guess. How is it that we're going to change what's happening? And in this case, knowing how close we are to the election, if you had 30 seconds to try to send a message to people watching, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, in regard to the program tonight, that is a supreme effort to bring about change and to enlighten people and to elucidate the issues that are surrounding this particular argument. I think that it's absolutely incumbent upon us, especially people who are involved in higher education, to provide opportunities to enlighten a population, to have civil, academic discussion about how these images impact our lives. And I think that Mr. Gray made a very profound point with this whole issue of codification, because these images are not just visual entities, they're also verbal entities. And when you bring all of those elements together, well, it erects a terrifying picture. But also, Kathy, I would like to say this. I'm also very proud of America as well. I am very proud that our nation has reached a point where an African American can be on the precipice of the presidency. This also speaks to the work that has been done, that America wants to move past this awful past. It wants to bury it, kill it, put the grave marker on it, and move on. And I think that programming such as the one that we're going to have tonight is going to be an important step in that process, because we can't kill that which we've not recognized as being alive. So at the same time, I'm proud of America. And I'm proud to be an American.
And I can appreciate fully what you're saying about having a discussion and educating people, because more times than not, whenever you hit an issue like this one, people get so caught up in what doesn't really matter. It's unproductive.
It's uncomfortable in America to discuss the issue of race. There's a lot of guilt, there's still a lot of anger, and because of that, it becomes difficult to have a fruitful conversation, one that really does solve issues, but that's no reason not to have those conversations. Right. And earlier we were saying, no, we're not doing this to promote some sort of controversy. The controversy is already there. You don't have to promote it. What we were promoting now is dialogue and discussion. The controversy is there. It's been there 400 years. There's no way to get around that. But in order to have the dialogue that is necessary to bring this into the proper perspective, it is the duty of universities like this one to have these conversations, to have these discussions, to expose the younger students to this, so that they will understand that this is an old concept. Yes. It's not one that has just started, and it's endemic. Yes. It's endemic in our society, and so we have to attack that. We can't act like it's not there. This is not a colorblind society.
Right, and Ben has spent the majority of his life addressing these issues in a way that I think is constructive, obviously, and educational, and gets people to sit up and pay attention to what's happening. Talk to us about your expertise, all the knowledge that you have, Ben, and all the experience. What have you found to be the greatest, I guess, key to success in what you've done in trying to communicate?
I think what you have to do is when you're trying to put forth and raise the level of discussion, one of the things you have to do is you have to put things out there. Like, for example, the first time this community, and I'm talking about the Omaha community now, heard extensively some of the work of Malcolm X was when I presented it on a television show. I mean, when I first did it, people were enraged, called the station, get him off, shoot him, all kinds of things. He said, get a rope, all those sorts of things when I first did it. And as you do it over and over again and begin to have the discussions, because I think what people need to understand about Malcolm X during that period of time, what they need to understand about Reverend Wright and others who they summarily dismiss without addressing why they're angry. And they're angry because African American people are still pretty much in the same position, if not worse off, than they were during the 60s when the civil rights movement began and things began to change. There are people in significantly more dire straits now. And so the anger is still there, the frustration is still there, but we want to bury it. We want to say, we want to do all other kinds of things except have those kinds of discussions. So when you hear a Reverend Wright, or when you hear a Louis Farrakhan, or when you hear someone else, or a Senator Chambers or others who are still angry because things still exist, we want to be dismissive of that rather than having the kinds of discussions that these gentlemen are going to have tonight. And I think when you have it in a setting where, where you're on a university campus, in some ways it's a little bit more safe because whites want to ask some really significant questions, I think, but they're afraid to ask in certain settings. And so that ignorance continues to exist between people of color and people who are white because whites are afraid to ask certain questions. African Americans still have, in some instances, an attitude towards some of the things that have not been done correctly, and so that desire to talk gets lost in the anger and the fear.
Okay, well, let's talk then. What are some of those questions that are wanting to be asked that don't get asked? And let's talk about the answers. Let's pick a few. Ben, why don't you throw one out and let's talk about it.
I'm involved now in youth outreach and dealing with gang members and stuff like that. And the question always comes up: why are so many young people involved in gangs? Well, the majority of young people aren't involved in gangs, but you're not going to know that because the images that you see on television reflect, black men going to jail, black men in handcuffs, and all of those sorts of things. The majority of people, and which is why, being the chairman of the African American Achievement Council, we put out in the newspaper, the large list of African American young people who have a 3.5 or better grade point average in our public schools, because you have to do those things to counteract what you see daily in the media. But people want to ask that question: why are so many black men involved in gangs? Well, most of them aren't, and the ones who are there because they feel disenfranchised. They feel left out. And those things never get discussed. All you hear is these guys doing this, these guys doing that, and I can guarantee you that at least 90% of the guys who do what they're doing don't want to do it. But they feel so disenfranchised, so left out, and so angry by circumstances that this gang organization becomes their family.
Here's another statistic that is very, very misleading. In fact, it's a lie. And that statistic is that there are more black men in jail than there are in college. Okay, but you're talking the ones that are incarcerated from 19 to 60. If you just count the young black men from 19 to 23, then that's not so. That's not so at all. There are a lot of young black men that are in college. But if you're going to put every black man, no matter what age he is, in that equation, then it changes things, and it makes things seem a lot more negative than they actually are.
So Omowale, what are we doing then? I mean, if we listen to this and statistics show us otherwise, why on earth are we as a society, and specifically here today, the media, insisting that we have to keep reporting it the other way?
Well, let me give you one great example, and I want to come back to Meshach's point because he made a very, very good point, and I want to elaborate on that some more. Let's take the issue of standardized testing and African American children's test scores. We all know that typically, nationally, African American children score lower than white students on standardized tests. Now, the scenario I would give you is this. If someone were giving an IQ test and they told you what they made on the test, you concentrate on the score. What I would ask is, who is the person that came up with the 100 items that if you get right means you're smart? Because that's the person who is, in essence, determining intelligence.
Yes.
So rather than tell me your score on the test, who constructed the test? Who is the person, who is the brainiac that sat down and said, if you know these 100 things, you're brilliant. If you know 75% of them, you're fair. Now, let me bring that back to your point. The problem isn't black children's performance on tests. We need to look at the test instrument themselves.
Absolutely.
As purveyors of the same racist, patriarchal paradigms that have been a part of the American society and system of education for years. What if we were asking them to talk about things that they know? So what I would say is the reason we keep mired in this is because if you look at it on the surface, you're only examining these scores without looking at the deeper sociological manifestations of social construction of knowledge and how that impacts African American children's success in school.
Okay. And Ben, I'm going to go back over to you with the specific on the media question. You know, we do it here in Omaha where we tend to drive more quickly as media folks and authorities to a crime located in a certain part of town than we do another. The crimes can happen in both parts at the same time, but yet where are we going to drive first? And what story is going to get the most attention? And that's not just happening in Omaha.
Oh, no.
That's happening everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Statewide, you know, nationwide, whatever the case may be. What is going to be the key to change there? We all know what's happening. The viewers understand, oh, you went over there, yeah, because you always do. And it enrages some folks and others just come to accept it. What's the answer with that? And do you see us heading in a better direction?
Well, you know, I think the answer to that is for people to read more, because if you're going to get your news on broadcast news services, those are headline organizations, and they're only going to be able to do. I mean, I took people through a scenario once of actually how much news you get when you watch a half-hour newscast, and it actually comes out to maybe 12, 13 minutes. So, you know, I mean, what are you going to do? How are you going to cover not only, you know, and we want to put the world in there and a number of other, you know, and a regional coverage and a world coverage and all of that, and we want to do it in about 13 to 14 minutes and try to present to you the world. So it's not going to happen when you watch a television news source, because they're a headline service, and the headline service is going to do what consultants tell them to do. And by and large, what consultants tell them to do is that violence sells, sex sells. All those kinds of things sell. So if it's titillating, if it's violent, if it has something that of shock value that gets you to watch, that's what you're going to see on television.
Because it's about ratings.
And it's not their fault.
It's not
it's
about news.
ratings.
It's not about news. News in today's world on the network is entertainment based. It's not news based. So it has to be titillating enough, exciting enough to pull the ratings. So they try to outdo each other with stories that are titillating. They tease you with a story of violence to keep you on that channel. It is not news; it's entertainment.
I remember, Kathy, when live trucks first came on the scene, and a lot of us who were concerned, who describe ourselves as pure journalists, were concerned that you were going to use those live trucks on every single newscast, every single story. Mm-hmm. You know, you were going to do that, and we kept being told that no, we're only going to do it when it calls for it, when it's immediate, when it's all of those sorts of things. That's what we were led to believe when they first got live trucks. Okay, but at some point in time, you got to justify that $100,000+ expenditure that you got to make. So what do you see now? In every newscast, on every station, everywhere around the country, there are multiple live shots behind empty buildings and empty classrooms and things that happened 8 hours ago. But because you have to have that live presence, and because consultants tell you that this is something that you have to have in order to, you know, get your audience to watch, those are the things we do. It has nothing to do with whether it has news value or not. It has to do with how you pull in ratings and how you pull in viewers.
Well, and as with so much else, education's really going to be the key. And I am amazed that we are already out of time. This is a discussion that we could absolutely go in much greater detail on. I want to wish the two of you tonight the best of luck with this program. And we want
Me too, and I'm going to watch you guys.
Yes.
You do your best.
And again, the documentary is called Ethnic Notions. And for those of you who want more information, please contact UNO's Black Studies Department. That number is 402-554-2412. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it very, very much. Best wishes to you. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at untv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.